Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's the top 12 defense DST units. I'm ranking this week number 1 the Philadelphia Eagles. So this Eagle defense, one of the best units in the league. And they've been holding good offenses down, including last week the Baltimore Ravens. So this week with a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers, even though their offense has definitely improved over the last few weeks, even putting up 27 points a few weeks ago versus the Kansas City Chiefs and losing in overtime last week versus the Tampa Bay Bucs. I think Philadelphia goes out there. They get to Bryce Young early and often. In this defense, they're creating a lot of pressure. And with Mitchell in the secondary, he's been shutting down top wide receivers all season long. So this week, I think Philly goes out there, has a big performance. Number 2, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers, a rematch of a couple weeks ago from Week 12's ball game versus the Cleveland Browns, where it was a blizzard towards the end of that game. And the Steelers lost that one. And Jameis Winston, no doubt about it, he's going out there. He's putting up yards, but he's also giving the ball away, and he's giving up pick sixes, and we saw it versus the Denver Broncos in that Monday night ball game in Week 13. 2 pick sixes and almost 3 pick sixes in that ball game. So Pittsburgh, I think, could get pressure on Jameis Winston. I'm not saying Winston's going to go out there and throw 6 interceptions, but I believe a couple interceptions game, take a few sacks with TJ Watt. Obviously, one of the best, if not the best pass rusher in all pro football. And Winston, he might even be good for another pick 6 in this one. Number 3, the Minnesota Vikings. So this week, a matchup versus their former quarterback, Kirk Cousins, coming back to Minnesota. And Kirk Cousins, last week, it was a train wreck for him versus the Chargers. He had 4 turnovers in that ball game. And this week, I think they could get pressure on Cousins. And I still believe he's not 100% coming off the Achilles, or just weary of not taking a lot of snaps on the center, where it's been a lot of shotgun formation for Kirk Cousins this season and a pistol instead of on the center. But this week here, I also could see it the other way, where they put points on the board. But I think this Minnesota Viking team, they're going to get Cousins a few times down on the ground with sacks, where he's not mobile much in the pocket. And also, like I said, he's a gunslinger and turns that football over. So I think Minnesota, where they've been one of the better units all season long, goes out there once again, have a decent performance. Number 4, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is a 1-week streaming option. What a good matchup with the Vegas Raiders coming to town. I think Tampa Bay could get off to an early start and make it tough for Aiden O'Connell in this offense to put up a lot of points and turn the football over. Could happen a few times as well. Even though last week they went in to Kansas City, a tough place in Arrowhead, and they took it down to the wire, where O'Connell had 340 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I believe Tampa Bay this week, back home, after a long road trip for this Tampa Bay Buck team, go out there, have a good ball game. And if they could find a way to slow down Brock Bowers just a little bit, I think that's the recipe for success for them in this ball game. And we saw it a couple weeks ago versus a bad Giant offense. They had a good fantasy ball game with Tampa Bay. Number 5, New Orleans Saints. So the Saints, another streaming option this week at the New York Giants. We don't know if it's going to be Drew Lock once again in the lineup, or it's going to be Tommy DeVito. But either quarterback, they're going to take some sacks. One of the worst offensive lines in the league is this New York Giant O-line. And they're going to create some turnovers as well, where they're good for 1 or 2 turnovers per game. So New Orleans is a 1-week streaming option, and a team who's been decent in terms of giving up points, low 20s to mid 20s. Most of the games have been this season. I think they could go into MetLife Stadium and carve out a decent performance. Number 6, the Tennessee Titans. So this week, a good matchup and a 1-week use only as well is Tennessee, where they got the doors blown off a lot this season versus good teams. This week, Jacksonville coming to town. Mac Jones, most likely the starting quarterback, and they're depleted. Christian Kirk out for the season. Gabe Davis out for the season. Travis Etienne really hasn't done much. The offensive line banged up as well. So I think Tennessee could get pressure early and often in this game. And their defense, like I said, they've given up a lot of points, but also they've created some turnovers, and they actually get to the quarterback a little bit and get some sacks. I think this week versus the Jaguars, this Titan team could go out there and they're nice streaming use for fantasy owners. Number 7, the Seattle Seahawks. So this Seahawks secondary, and even offensively, their whole season's turned around over the last few weeks. They got off to the hot start to begin the year. Then they went on a big losing streak, and now they turned it around. And this defense has really gone out there and buckled down, making some big plays. We saw last week where they were on the verge of most likely losing that game, but Leonard Williams turned the field with a 90-yard pick 6 versus former team, the New York Jets. And going back a couple weeks ago, in this matchup versus same Arizona Cardinal team, holding them to 6 points, including a pick 6 in that game. So Seattle's finding ways to be explosive defensively, taking the football and finding the end zone. And this week at Arizona, I could see some of the same success once again. I know Arizona has a good offense. Kyler Murray having a pretty good year. Trey McBride, one of the best tight ends in all pro football. Marvin Harrison's had a pretty decent rookie season, I thought. as well. But Seattle, like I said a couple weeks ago, they had the right game plan, shut down this offense, holding them to 6 points. And I think this week, once again, Seattle goes out there, has a good game. I'm not saying they're going to hold them to 6 points, but mid-teens, low 20s is a possibility. Number 8, the Kansas City Chiefs. So this Chief defense, they've definitely been leaky at times this season. But in terms of giving up points, they're not giving up a lot. Teens, low 20s, a majority of their ball games have been. And they got a good track record over the last few seasons versus Justin Herbert and this Charger team. And Lab McConkey, even if he does play, he's not going to be 100% in this one. So I think Kansas City could get to Herbert a couple times. I think they could create some turnovers. And we even saw last week versus a bad defense. Justin Herbert didn't do much out there. So Justin Herbert, for the most part this season, he hasn't been good on the road. Where at home, obviously he's been a great quarterback. But this week, going in tough matchup at Arrowhead, I think this Chief defense could take advantage of Herbert and the Chargers in this one. Have a good performance. Number 9, the Miami Dolphins. So another streaming option this week with the New York Jets coming to town. Aaron Rodgers, he's taking a lot of sacks this season. The offensive line just isn't good, and they're old. And also, he's turning the football over at an alarming rate like we've never seen before in Rodgers' career. Like I said, he's thrown pick sixes. I think Miami, their defense, even though it's not great, could create some havoc in this ball game and cause a few turnovers, even though I definitely could see this game in the low 20s to mid 20s between these two teams. Number 10, the Buffalo Bills. So this Bill DST has definitely turned things around over the last couple weeks here. And they got Matt Milano back in the lineup after he missed the season and a half for this Buffalo Bill team. I know this week, not the greatest of matchups at the Rams, but Matthew Stafford, he's not 100% coming into this game with an ankle injury. And last week versus a mediocre defense of the Saints, they had trouble scoring the football. Most of that game was the Los Angeles Rams. So Matthew Stafford, we know he's a gunslinger. We know he's going to turn the football over at times. And he's also a quarterback that takes big hits and gets sacks a lot. So I think this Buffalo Bill team, if they could get off to an early start and make this team one-dimensional, could tee off a little bit and get some sacks and turn the football over, even though I still think the Rams are going to get points. But Buffalo, in other ways, could put up fantasy points this week. Number 11, the San Francisco 49ers, so the rookie quarterback, Caleb Williams, and the spare team coming to town. But this 49er defense, they've just had problems and breakdowns, especially late in games this season. So Chicago, like I said, they got some weapons on offense. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet, a pretty decent tight end, I believe. And this 49er defense, a lot of lapses. And Nick Bosa not 100%. I mean, even Warner last week, we saw he was banged up in the middle of that game and went to the locker room. So with a banged-up defense and San Francisco, a lot of lapses in the secondary, I think Chicago could go out there and limit what San Francisco could do in terms of being a top 5, top 8 option. And the 12th and final defense DST I'm ranking is the Detroit Lions. So this Lion team, they get to the quarterback. They've held in opponents down over the last few weeks. But this week, a tough test, no doubt about it, on Thursday Night Football with a good offense coming to town in the Green Bay Packers. So a great division matchup. Thursday night games usually more high scoring than usual. Detroit Lion defense, they're creating turnovers. They get into the quarterback. And we know Jordan Love as well has turned the football over in terms of throwing interceptions is a decent amount this season. So I think this week Detroit still could go out there, even versus a good offense, and be a serviceable option. So that's the top 12 defense DST units I'm ranking for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.